Yayında mıyız beyler? Evet. Yayında mıyız? Geliyor.
Special forces show off Korean fighting skills in a taekwondo display as the country celebrates its armed forces past and present. The commander-in-chief, President Moon Jae-in, inspected the troops, then addressed them, saying the military's top priority is countering the North Korean nuclear and missile threats and protecting peace.
The Korean government's determination to safeguard peace is anchored in strong national defense capabilities. Reckless provocations will only be met with tough punishment.
On display, the range of military hardware that South Korea has at its disposal to take on what it sees as the threat from North Korea, including strategic ballistic missiles revealed for the first time to the public. In another first, the commemorations were held at the strategically important 2nd Fleet Naval Base, key in the defense of waters off the west coast, the site of previous confrontations with North Korea, all part of the central message directed to the government across the border.
My administration and our military will never show any hesitance in safeguarding the people and homeland. Our armed forces' combat strength overwhelms that of North Korea.
We are stronger than ever, and we have strong weapons behind us.
The ceremony is an annual event marking the anniversary of the day in 1950 when South Korean forces crossed the border into the north. This year it comes at a time when the president says the security crisis on the peninsula is worsening. South Korea. This display intended to show that South Korea is ready to defend itself at any time.
Well, it certainly doesn't have an official treaty, but it has had an armistice since 1953, 1954, which, of course, the U.S. violated, but nobody ever pays any attention to that. The assertion that North Korea can't be trusted to negotiate is simply false, and to assert that is either blind ignorance or a deliberate misrepresentation of the truth. For example, during the Clinton administration, the North Koreans stood down on their nuclear program, but then the Bush administration came along, called them the axis of evil, and put an end to North Korea's faith that the U.S. would keep its side of the bargain. You know, and this is not well known at all. When the original armistice was signed in 1953, 1954, there were certain items that the United States was bound to agree to, and one of them was that it would not introduce new weapons into the South to threaten the North. But in 1958, it did so, and it brought nuclear weapons onto the peninsula for the first time, and overtly threatened North Korea with the presence of those nuclear weapons, which also seriously threatened China. And that's why both North Korea and China have nuclear weapons today, because they fear the nukes of the United States. It's as simple as that.
I want us to now take a look at North Korea's latest statement. It said that the U.S. was at war with them. This was dismissed by the U.S. government and the U.S. media. But in light of recent threats made by President Trump at the UN, do you think North Korea is justified in claiming the U.S. has declared war on them?
Well, the U.S. hasn't really declared war on anyone since 1941, but it certainly has waged a lot of wars against people, including North Korea itself, and also, as a result of that, ravaged South Korea, our allies, the people we were supposed to be aiding. It's very similar in Vietnam. You know, it's just preposterous to think that the United States is innocent in all of this. You know, a technical state of war still exists. The armistice is just that, a ceasefire. It's not a peace treaty. So, technically speaking, the United States is still at war with North Korea. And given that, you know, the U.S. asserts that there are no nukes in South Korea today, but there are plenty of them on submarines off in the Pacific, and certainly there are bombers in Guam and so on. So, you know, the threat that North Korea feels from the United States nuclear weapons is always present. And, you know, given what has happened to Libya, to Iraq, and others, you know, North Korea believes that its security will have to rely on its own nuclear weapons, unfortunately, and to the detriment of international security writ large.
Professor, there's been talks of the U.S. pulling out of the Iran deal. Does that undermine U.S. credibility, and what message does that send to North Korea in terms of agreeing to a peace treaty with the U.S.?
Well, I think what the U.S. is really doing, and has been doing all along, is that it's asserting its credibility as the would-be dominant power on planet Earth. And it certainly asserted that in Iraq. There was no legal basis for the invasion of Iraq and the destruction, really, of Iraq. It just forgive me, I get so frustrated with all of this. You know, certainly the North Koreans feel that they are justified in keeping, you know, and developing nuclear weapons, and asserting that they'd use them. And let's not forget that they will use them if the United States attacks the North. I'm quite certain, I think most analysts are certain that Korea would use its nuclear weapons, and not only in Korea, but against Japan. And, you know, as Kim Jong-un has been saying all along, he could target the American military base in Guam as well.
All right, Professor, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your insight. That was Paul Atwood, Professor of American Studies at the University of Massachusetts. Thank you again.
Russian sappers have started to demine the area around the Syrian city of Deir ez-Zor to clear routes for humanitarian convoys. That's after the Syrian army, backed by Russian air power, broke a 3-year siege of the city by Islamic State. Meanwhile, the operation to clear Deir ez-Zor of terrorists is ongoing, as pockets of ISIL resistance still remain. These are the latest pictures from the front lines, and according to Russia's defense ministry, only 20% of Syrian territory still remains being held by Islamic State.